Hey Ian, you ready?
You bet I am. What are we talking about tonight? And talk about guns?
If it's not a 30 cal, I'm not in.
Jeez, mate, that's not very inclusive. Have you seen Jono?
Hey Jono, you ready?
Well, God knows where he is, mate. He's probably caught up in the neighbour's wire again. You ready to go? Let's do this.
Mate, I'm ready. Let's crank it up.
Righto then. Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of the Hunter's Campfire, where we're going to talk about all things hunting and the great outdoors. And we'll probably throw in a few tips along the way.
You want a tip? Say it once, say it 1,000 times. Goats love rocks.
Or a few things about deer. Mark, what do you reckon about deer?
As a deer hunter, I love hunting pigs.
Well, that's about as useful as I expected it to be. Oh, check it out. Here comes Jono. He's being chased by the neighbour's dog.
Okay guys, let's get this started. Welcome to the Hunter's Campfire. Pull up a chair, get comfortable. It's time for the Hunter's Campfire.
Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, John.
How are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you. A little sore from bench shooting, a 9.3 by 74R, I can tell you, with a timber stock with no recoil pad. It's a bit of a beast off the bench. I'm a bit bashed up, but I figured out a way to do it. I've actually kind of jimmied up a recoil pad that I can stick on my shoulder.
Has it got a limb saver or something like that?
No,
or just
no, it's straight timber. And
so it's
it's as big as it's 18-inch barrel, straight timber, whacks you hard. So I'm back at the range on Friday, continuing to side it in. I want to get it ready for 100 and learning about the vagrancies of a double rifle.
Is it different
basically
shooting to a bolt?
Say again?
Is it very different to shoot a double?
Well, yeah, it is, because it's basically two rifles together.
Mm.
So if you think about it, when you've got like a rifle with the scope on top, you're kind of at least looking on the same vertical plane. With the double rifle, you've got two horizontal barrels, so they're spaced apart. So even if they were like laser beams, they wouldn't hit at the same spot. And the sight's in the middle. So if you think about it, you've got kind of three different planes that you're trying to, as best you can, align. So it's a little tricky. And the question is, which barrel do you kind of pick?
Does it have a selector like a shotgun? You can choose the barrel. Does it have a selector?
And it doesn't appear to have a selector, no. So It seems to fire to right first. I haven't seen a selector, but I might be missing that, but I haven't seen a selector. So, yeah, I basically want to get it within a reasonable MOA and then maybe put the aim point in the middle of the two of them once I know where they are.
Okay.
So I know one's a little bit to the left and one's a bit to the right. Now, we are shooting buffalo, okay? So we're shooting bowling ball size lungs and hearts. But, I do like them. You want that confidence that where it's pointing, it's where it's landing. So, yeah, I'm working on that. And I will take my 30-06 and I'll drop that back down with 180 grains to 100 yards. Because at the moment it's running at 150s at 200.
Yeah, okay. I don't think we're going to be shooting 200 up in the territory, that's for sure.
No, and the other thing is, I know a couple of people want to use a double, so I might let them take it out and I'll do backup with the 180s on the 30-06.
Okay. So have you got the aim point on there now, and that's what you're using for zero?
Yep, got the aim point on it. So yeah, I think I fired 13 shots before I went, yeah, that's enough.
And what ammo are you putting through that?
It's 280. It's a standard 286 ammo for the 9.3. It's just that it's got more oomph in it because it's an 11 millimeter longer case.
It is, yeah, because I'm shooting the 9.3 by 62.
74.
Yeah.
It's just got more oomph. And it's gotten, and also the rifle itself is, it's, as I said, it's smaller and lighter. So I've got more punch in a smaller
package.
In a smaller package. So yeah, it's a little bit, she's a bit wild, but I mean, you won't notice when there's a big buff in front of you or a big hog, but she's a bit wild.
And you're shooting that out at Ripley, were you?
Sort of the Belmont, because it runs under 3,200 feet.
Oh, so it runs under the
foot-pounds.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah, it's just under 3,200 foot-pounds. So she's okay.
I need to check my 9.3.
It's probably the top of the there's other things, of course, more modern calibers, but in the more traditional calibers, it's about the top you can run at Belmont.
Okay. I thought you couldn't run over a sort of 30 cal 308 type.
No, it's speed and or foot-pounds. Okay. And so it's both under the speed, and I think the speed's like 3,500. So,
but a bigger, heavier bullet's going to go slower, but it's going to have more energy.
The trouble is foot-pounds. So,
that's the energy.
Big 416 rips you up in a foot-pounds, but it shoots just under 3,200 foot-pounds, which is the limit.
That's good to know.
It's okay for there. Yeah. So, and I think the 9.3 by 62 I know it's a bit slower. And it's probably got less energy too, so
that's good to know, because I need to get out to the range, because we've got, at the time of this recording, 2 weeks to go till we're in the territory. So by the time this drops, we're probably in the territory or on our way to the territory, potentially. Right. So I need to get out and check my 9.3. I have zeroed it because I put a new scope on it. I had Byron at the Beretta Australia workshop. He's done a beautiful Cerakote on that, so it's looking pretty. And also I've got different ammo, so I'm shooting the Norma Oryx on this trip. Yeah. So I have done 1.0, but I want to take it back out and check it. And then I was also going to take the Benelli Lupo with me, which I want to re-zero with the Psycho ammo. I know we spoke on this podcast about the Gecko, which I wasn't too impressed with the bullet performance, and I think if we're shooting some big hogs or potentially donkeys, and I've got the 306, I want a better round.
Solid slammers, So that's what I'm doing. I'm currently running the Norma 150. I'm going to go back to the Oryx in 180s. They're good pills. They fly very well too. I shot a lovely deer with one at the beginning of the year. There's nothing wrong with them. And strangely enough, because the rifle had the chap we had the original sighting kind of proof in it, and they shot Oryx out of it originally.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's all in French, so you have to kind of interpret it, put it in the little thing.
Google Translate.
There was this really interesting thing, and we were trying to figure it out. What it's saying is, don't wait 3.5 seconds before thumping the second trigger. It says, don't punch them out too quick.
Yeah, okay. Just too much.
So, but I was watching these guys shoot buffalo on a video, and they basically backed each other up. And I thought that's a sensible thing to do.
That is the right thing to do.
Just like, I'm shooting this one, bang, I shoot, and the second guy went, okay, boom, and they, boom. And I thought that's a sensible way to go about it.
Yeah, definitely. They're big animals, and they can take a pounding, as you know, with lead. So, yeah, I think backing each other up is probably not a bad idea, especially if you've got a bow hunter in the group.
That's right, especially with Michael. Holy bow, buddy. And so, because you're going to have to I mean, when you're hunting with Michael, you won't have Graham, the cameraman, with you, because that would be only one rifle then.
Yeah, true.
So you want to have 2 rifles with Michael and 2 rifles with Graham. So if you've got 2 rifles, you say, Michael, if you're okay with this, and if you say, hit it, then open up on it.
Yeah, I think that's...
And I've already spoken to Ian, and he says, you don't even have to say that to me. He said, as soon as I shoot, you start shooting. I said, okay, fine. They're cool rules. I like that rule.
Yeah.
So you were away on the weekend too, weren't you?
I was, yeah. So I was on a red deer hind cull up here in the Brisbane Valley, just helping out the farmer. We do it every, a few times a year. Just go up and help out, and yeah, cull some of the hinds that are running around. So it was a good weekend. The weather cleared up nicely after all the rain we had last week. It's looking very dry up there, so up in the top end of the Brisbane Valley, very, very dry, which you would expect at this time of the year. We haven't had much rain. But look, it was a beautiful property. So it's a cattle property that we're on. Pretty big, pretty large property. It does border some state forests as well. And deer numbers were looking good, really, really good. I think we probably saw at least 200 deer over the course of the weekend. And as a group, we took 16 deer, all red deer. I think all hinds as well, which is good. I was successful as well, which is nice. So my fridge is looking pretty full. I need to finish the butchery and get that into the freezer, which was the goal of the weekend, was A, help out the farmer, and B, fill the freezer. So very successful. Had some issues on the weekend, which were a bit troubling, I guess, for me, where I decided to take my Tika on this trip, my Tika 308. So I've got Tika T3, which I've had for probably 9 or 10 years now, which I actually bought through Queensland Gun Exchange when Scott from Breeder Australia was still working there.
I think Scott saw more Tikas than I know Tika factory. I know.
But yeah, I bought my first. This is the first rifle I bought in Australia. It wasn't my first Tika. I've owned Tikas before. I do love them. They're a good gun. But I had a bit of an issue on one. So we had been out stalking the hills, and we came up on a mob of deer, and I was hunting with this guy Rob, and Rob spotted the deer, so he was up first, and he shot one of the hinds, and I was filming it, and he shot a second hind, and they sort of milled around. So I thought, well, I'm going to take one as well. So I lined up on a hind and I pulled the trigger, and the gun went click, and I thought I didn't load this properly. So I basically went to go and chamber around, and out popped one of my loaded pills. So I made that safe. I sort of moved it away, and I chambered another round and lined up on the deer and shot the hind. The hind ran probably 20, 30 meters downhill, and then I saw it fall down, and there were still a few more hinds around. So I thought, all right, I'll take another one, and lined up on that next hind, pulled the trigger, click, and the gun didn't go bang, which is what I expected. And I knew I'd put one in. And by this point, the hinds ran off, and that was that. So I picked up both of the rounds that hadn't gone off, and the firing pin has struck the primer, but not as deeply as would you expect, and B, as one of the ones that have gone off. So I'm not sure if it's an issue with the rifle or if it's an issue with the ammunition. I've shot a large number of these rounds. So I'm using the Sarco Powerhead 162 grain in my 308, which I've shot numerous deer with and never had an issue. So I reached out to Byron, the workshop manager at Breeder Australia, and he's given me a few things to check. He said, take the bolt apart, have a look, make sure there's no dirt and grime and oil. Yeah. He said there should be no oil inside it. Make sure that's nice and clean. He said try different ammo as well. So I think this weekend I'm going to go to the range to check my 9.3. So I'll take the 308 and I'll put a few rounds through it of just different ammunition, just to see if I have any issues. And if he said if I still have issues after that, then I need to send the bolt down to him and he'll take a look at it. So that's that's awesome service from Breeder Australia. The fact that you can reach out to them for a bit of advice and tips, which is always good. And hopefully there's no issue with that rifle because it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, but even if there is, it'd be just either replacing the pin or replacing the spring
or something like that. Which it's only a 10-year-old rifle. You would think it would still be okay. But...
I've seen people have problems with rifles before. I'm luckily never really experienced one myself, but it's often the other way. People have, they close the bolt and it goes bang.
Well, interestingly, the first thing that Byron said to me when I spoke to him was, "Have you got a Picatinny rail on the rifle?" and which I don't, not on this rifle. And I know many people do run rails. I've got a rail on my Sour, and some rifles these days, for instance, the Lupo comes from the factory with a Picatinny rail. So I questioned him. It's like, why would a rail?
He said that too.
And it's
I've seen that problem that he's talking about.
The screws.
The screws are too long. Yeah, I've literally seen that.
Yeah,
people go, I can't close the bolt. I can't close the bolt.
And it's because the screws on the rail are too long.
Sticking through.
Yeah. So that's why the first thing he asked me was, have you got a rail on there? Which I don't. So, but I thought that was interesting. I've not heard that before. It makes sense.
I was at the range once, and this guy fitted the scope with a rail, and he was, there was a bit of and he just could not close the bolt. And and everyone was in there and stuff like that, and I think someone stuck their finger in and went, "Oh, hang on!" And the grub screw was just a bit too long. And it went through and it, ding, 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 hitting that. Yeah, so, I've literally seen that. Yeah.
So I guess if you're fitting a rail to your rifle, make sure you check and there's no screws protruding through into the chamber.
Yeah, don't just find this one will fit and it goes too far in. Yeah.
And I guess make sure you've tightened the screws to the correct torque and not gone over tighten them so they've gone too long and all the rest of it. So.
Yeah, that's why I don't like rails.
No, I'm not either. But in some instances, you've got no choice.
Yeah, some instances, in fact, the Chapuis in a way has a rail. It's not a Picatinny rail, but it has a rail because it's designed as an open sight. It has a rail on it to fit a scope. It's much more elegant than a Picatinny rail, but that's what it is. Yeah, but I mean, a lot of rifles now come with rails. But one of the reasons I always liked Tikkas is they had the integrated,
the mount,
reset in there. You can put it directly onto the receiver, and I like that. And in fact, the Sauer 505 that I've just finished reviewing, that's got a fantastic system like that. The only downside is it is such a proprietary system. You can only use it with blaster scopes. But it has an integrated, so in the top of the receiver it has these 4 little recesses, and you put the blaster scope on there, and the 2 little kind of quick release levers, and then bang, the scope is on, and it's fantastic. But if you wanted to build a rifle where you had, like a platform where you can do anything, because you can put on that. And you can do it yourself too, which is really interesting. You can basically buy a 223 barrel in action, or put on or a bolt, because the receiver stays the same, or 375 H&H Magnum barrel and a bolt, and it's the same rifle. And then you get your 2 different scopes, so you get like a little 1:4 safari scope, and you got the one rifle, and you can build the whole system if that's what you wanted to do. So you could have like multiple barrels, multiple scopes. Same action, and if you go outside, if you go outside the diameter of the bolt, you have to go to a different bolt.
Okay, that's interesting.
It is.
Well, I suppose, that's a good segue. Should we? Yeah, let's explore rifles. I guess people often, it's one of the main questions we get is about rifles.
That's right. I suppose a few things. One is as I said, I've just submitted another rifle review, and actually I've just realised that's my 147th article.
Wow.
So I said I was going to write a book at 100, and so I'm 47 over, because I haven't even started writing a book. So, and I've just been actually asked to do a multi article story, not review story, or about lefty rifles. And as you said, we still get lots of questions about rifles. And in fact, another point where that's come up is Lawson White's looking at doing, I know he's advertising his hunting courses again, and the basic hunting course. And at that basic hunting course that Ian and I spoke at Stanthorpe with Lawson, the amount of people that asked questions about rifles, and they were kind of saying, what kind of, and I mean, really, what kind of rifle should I get and things like that. And then at that particular event, Ian had his BRX, and that attracted a lot of interest. And strangely, the reason it attracted interest, especially from this one family, was that they were lefties and righties.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can kind of, you can swap that over really easy. It's like a true ambidextrous rifle. So let's put the question. If you want to buy a rifle, what should you consider? So if we were to start at the beginning, I think, and this is what I feel, so tell me what you think. When people say to me, I want to buy a rifle, and they're talking about for the first time, I kind of think, do you want to buy a rifle or do you want to buy a rifle and scope? And are you going to put that rifle and scope in a bag? And do you have ammo to shoot that rifle and scope that you're going to put in a bag? I think that's the kind of the first thing you can consider, because, you and I, when we talk about rifle, we actually mean I'm going to buy a rifle. But I think for a lot of people, they're talking about, I want to buy a whole package.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, at the end of the day, is probably the first question for me is, what is the purpose? Why do you want to buy a rifle? Because if you're looking to buy a rifle because you want to do black powder, reenactments, then you're probably not going to be buying a rifle and a scope and a gun bag, because it's not going to happen. But, for us, our main purpose to own a rifle is for hunting. So I think let's focus on that. Someone comes to us and says, I want to buy a rifle for hunting. And then we'll say, well, you're going to need a rifle, a scope, a bag. So I think we work on that premise that, that's what the person wants. And the reason for them to buy that rifle is to go hunting. I think that's probably, for me, that's the first question, because that opens up, a lot of different options.
Okay, so let's frame it then. So you want to buy a rifle for hunting, primarily for hunting.
Yes,
so
primarily.
That doesn't mean that you can't do other things with it, but it's primarily you want to hunt. And when we talk about a rifle, you're starting from kind of scratch. So you need a rifle and a scope.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably rifle, scope, and ammunition for me are probably the most important. Right. A gun bag and other accessories will come, but and when you leave the gun shop, it'll either walk out of the gun shop in either a bag or a box, because you don't want to walk out carrying a gun. It's not the old days like you used to do in Brisbane. But
you just take a blanket, take a blanket, wrap them in a blanket.
So you're either going to have a box or you're going to have a gun bag, so you're looking to buy your first rifle for hunting, and therefore, we framed it as, if you're going to buy a rifle for hunting, you've got to have a scope. I mean, why wouldn't you these days? I don't know why anyone would not be using a scope.
That's right. Like a lot of things, the scopes have got better. That the band of better scopes has greatly, increased over the years. Once upon a time, there was a fairly distinct line between crap scope and good scope, and that line was controlled purely by a dollar. It was a line. It was a dollar line in the sand. But now you can actually do pretty well with a very reasonably priced scope. Yeah, you're actually, like, you're using you've got one of the Burris scopes on one of your rifles, and that was is it a Burris that you've got on one of your rifles?
I've got Burris, yeah.
And that was one of the, the more entry level scopes.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, for me, it was, if you were, your typical shooter would have a Tasco. That was probably the number one. A Tasco 4x40 or a 4x32.
That wasn't a bad scope at the time.
No, they were actually pretty good.
They were Japanese made. They were pretty good optics, to be honest.
And then if you had money, you would have a Zeiss or something like that. But it was very limited, whereas now the market, there are so many manufacturers and so many different countries. I think, you've got your European optics and the European glass, which are always expensive. You've got your Leicas, your Swarovski, your Zeiss. But there's American brands now that are making pretty good quality. Originally it was just Leopold if you wanted an American brand, but now you've got Vortex, and I think
You've got
Trigicon and all
Burris,
those, and
you've got
Burris, and
Bushnell, and so on and so forth.
yeah. So the availability of the different brands is it's ridiculous how many different brands there are, but
and then you
they're
get
all,
into
the quality
like
is
this,
so close.
You get Zerotech from Australia. There's Endeavour. I think there's a new one called Endeavour. There's a couple of Australian ones coming out. I mean, I actually wrote an article, review recently on some Lupo range finding binoculars, and I mentioned that, once upon a time here, Lupo is where you kind of wanted to end up. That was kind of, you worked your way up to owning that kind of stuff. Before that, you owned all sorts of reasonable quality stuff or really crappy quality stuff, depending on how much money you had. But that's where you wanted to end up. You wanted to end up with, a VX3 or something like that, when the 3 was a Roman 3.
Yeah,
not
I remember
3.
that.
So we're looking at, the whole package, because that's a cost consideration. And when we say it's a hunting rifle, so that kind of sets the scene where, so we're basically staying away from things that come in chassis that are meant for primarily for target shooting. So we're looking at a rifle that has a medium profile barrel. It's not a big heavy barrel. It's a bolt action. It may or may not have a box magazine, so it might have an internal magazine or a box magazine, but generally not particularly high capacity. And, some kind of stock out of timber or synthetic or laminate, things like that, in a pretty generic or traditional format. Maybe thumb hole, maybe not, depending on who you are. But that's what we're talking about from a hunting. I suppose the question that runs from that is, what kind of hunting?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important question. You don't want to get a big heavy rifle and then go, hunt the Victorian Alps, for instance. That's right. Yeah.
So when you mean by heavy, you don't mean by heavy caliber. You actually mean the build itself.
Physical weight.
Right.
So at your traditional, European type stocks, you could get with a wooden stock, or typically heavier. You could get the full length barrel, where the whole barrel has got timber on it. What do they call those?
Either Schutzen or an International.
Yeah,
and I've always wanted one of those.
Yeah, but you wouldn't want to be carrying all of that up in the Victorian Alps with, risk of snow and weight and all the rest of it. You're probably looking at a nice lightweight, synthetic stock, potentially even with a fluted barrel where you've got, some of the steel's been cut out just to try and reduce that weight. So yeah, I mean, I guess the terrain that you're going to be hunting in is important. If you're looking at just throwing a gun on the back of a Polaris or something like that, you probably don't want to get a nice, beautiful timber, grade 5 walnut stock and then just thrown it around and the back seat of the cruiser or on the front of the Polaris. You're probably going to look at something a bit more hard wearing, like a laminate stock or potentially even a synthetic stock, which are a lot more hard wearing. For instance, I get mocked a little bit about my my Lupo, which has got a beautiful timber stock on it, because I didn't want to take it out in the rain, and that's just because I didn't want it getting damaged. So I took my Tikka out, which has got a synthetic stock, which I know the weather conditions are not going to affect. So you've got to think about the terrain. What are you hunting in? Are you going to be climbing big mountains, or are you just going to be sitting on the truck and shooting off, across the bonnet or something like that? Then you could potentially go for a heavier rifle, weight-wise, and not be too concerned about, if you're worried about, the stock getting bashed around on the back seat, then don't go for timber, in my view. At least not a traditional timber stock.
And I suppose if you think about, there's kind of probably two, components of that. One is the optics. So again, the conditions that you're hunting in, you want to match your optics to those conditions. And again, it doesn't have to be 100%, but if you are, for instance, going to be taking a rest on a vehicle and shooting in low light or nighttime under a light or something like that, that's a different optic to an optic that you might be carrying in a state forest where you're actually encountering your game generally to 100 meters or lower. So you don't need something by 56 type of optic like that. Though there is, I did see that the Steiner now have a 1:10, which is pretty fantastic.
That's pretty, yeah.
Yeah. So which means if you want to buy that, once upon a time the magnification range was a 3x, so there was the old 3x9. So as you know, it magnified in increments of 3. Then they went to 4s and 5s. So, for instance, I've got a Steiner that's 2:10, so it's a magnification. There's now a 1:10, which is
it's quite amazing, actually.
Basically giving you from Safari, dangerous game, single, basically very, no real magnification to 10 power. That's a pretty impressive scope, but I'm sure it's not cheap. But that's it. So think about your magnification. And people get stuck with magnification. You think more magnification's better. More magnification or a higher level of magnification has its application, but where it doesn't work is if you're moving around on foot and you're seeing game in cover. Having a higher magnification in that state can actually work against you. It's harder for you to find that amongst that, or you actually want a slightly lower magnification, at least to acquire the game. Then you might want to wind up when you're on it if you're able to.
Yeah, but, so if you've got a variable scope, you probably
a variable
winding
scope.
down
if
and
you
then
can,
winding back up.
That's right. You want to. I think if you're hunting, for instance, the type of hunting that we mostly do, which is state forest hunting, you want lower magnification. It allows you to get a better initial sight picture on the game, and then you can go from. And then I suppose the third part of that equation is what kind of animal are you hunting, because that then dictates your caliber options.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, for instance, some states have got minimum caliber requirements for some species. So if you're going down to Victoria to hunt Samba, there's I think it's 270 minimum.
Yeah, so you're 6.5, so your quarter cal, so you're 2506, you're 6.5, they don't cut it. Legally, you're not able to hunt Samba with those.
Yeah, and I think New South Wales is minimum 243.
Minimum, I don't think New South Wales has technically a minimum. They have a recommended minimum. Yeah. Whereas Victoria have a definite, threshold. Interesting thing about this whole conversation is that often people, when they talk rifles, they actually talk calibers.
Yeah.
So say I've got a 243 or I've got a 270 and stuff. They're talking about calibers. And the other thing about caliber is if you're new to this and your friend's got a 243, then they're probably telling you that this is the world's greatest caliber and it can do everything, and or you got a 223 or a 6.5, what it is. The thing to remember about calibers is they're like golf. You pick the right caliber and you pick the right club. I mean, yeah, you can putt with your driver if you're really, really keen, but it's better to putt with a putter. It's better to drive with the driver. And it's better to get out of the bunker with sandwich. So picking your caliber is important. Where most people kind of struggle, I think, and this is a conversation, is that they want it to be kind of generalist. So they want a generalized caliber, and that's not necessarily really achievable. You can get.
Oh, I think it is. It depends on the species.
You can get a wider range, I suppose.
Yeah.
But you really can't. Well, I suppose you can shoot rabbits with a 308 if you really, really can.
You're not going to eat it after.
That's why you're not going to do anything except blow it up. But so when you're thinking about, again, your hunting in your location or the environment you're hunting in, also give real consideration to what you want to hunt in terms of game. So if you want to be, you want to hunt fox, rabbit, hare, that kind of thing, there's a good caliber range for you. If you want to, hunt primarily deer, goat, pig, there's a good caliber range for you. If you want to hunt big deer and buffalo, there's a good caliber range for you to think about. So it's not like they're not exclusive. I suppose they're kind of like they're ranges or bands. So you want to get in the right band about that.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you say you want to pick the right caliber in that band, there is some crossover. So
there is.
Yeah. So for instance, on our last trip to the territory, you and I shot 9.3 by 62s. Ian took up a 30.06, and he shot a buffalo and we shot a buffalo.
That's right.
Did he put more rounds into that buffalo? Well, I don't know about
probably
you,
not more
but
than I
probably
did.
not more than you did. But did it work? Yes, it did. But I know Ian had some concerns. And look, we were using premium bullets. It's a premium rifle, straight pull. He could cycle quickly. Is it recommended for you to take a 30.06 and go and hunt buffalo? Probably not. If it's your first buffalo and you're pretty inexperienced, I probably wouldn't. But that 30.06, it took pigs. We shot donkeys. There was, there is a lot of room within those bands, as you said. But ultimately you do want to select the most appropriate caliber.
And that's it. That's I think what most people find difficult to start with is that what you're looking for is the best compromise or the best or the most appropriate. And most buffalo, I would assume that most buffalo in the Northern Territory have been shot with either a 303 or a 308.
Yeah, probably.
Because the colours use 308s, and before that, everyone was shooting them with 303s. So, that's what it is. And, if you're head shooting these things or, that kind of, it's effective. And the other thing about rifles that are on the cusp, as it were, is that you can load even with factory ammunition, you can load a 30-06 up to 220 grain, which is, closer to the 9.3 than.
Well, yeah, I'm shooting 232s on this trip, but I'm using a premium bullet.
That's right, and that's it. So it's not only the projectile weight, but it's also the quality.
Yeah.
And and remember the 9.3 by 62, which is what we're using for buffalo, is primarily a forest game caliber in Europe. They shoot pigs with it.
Yeah, and for driven hunts and things like that.
Driven hunts, and that's what they use. So, there's also that idea of how to usage or traditional usage. But for most people, that's kind of the top end. It's more in that middle end where they expect, so they go, I want to hunt state forest. What are you likely to encounter? You're likely to encounter, from rabbits up to deer. What do you really want to focus on?
Yeah, so I think let's focus on that. Majority of our hunters and followers of the podcast hunt state forest or the private properties that surround state forests and the same sort of species. I think the extremes are going to be buffalo and camels, which not everyone will do, and you're certainly not going to do that if you're new and reaching out for the first time. So let's focus on that. Your primary purpose of this rifle is for hunting. You're going to be doing state forest and potentially some private land hunting for the typical species that we encounter. So what are we looking at? Fallow deer, red deer, maybe sambar, pigs, goats, and foxes probably, that's pretty much
wild dogs
and wild dogs. Yeah. So that those are the species that I think most people will be hunting and shooting. And I think if we say they're not going to be shooting from a Polaris, they're not going to be shooting across a bonnet, they're going to be walking in the state forests, and your typical walk and stalk, as we would say. Probably not shooting terribly far out to, I would say 200 is probably maximum, but more likely around 100, especially in the state forest that we shoot. What's sort of your thoughts on and recommendations there?
So if I was to build a rifle, I suppose the only thing that I would, the caveat on that is being a lefty. That's a primary consideration to me. And unfortunately that limits my rifle choice. Doesn't limit my caliber choice as much. It certainly limits my rifle choice. So I'm going to have a rifle that I'm basically going to carry. So I want something that is designed for that purpose. I want something that's designed to be carried. I want something that's designed primarily for hunting application. So in a state forest, I'm not going to shoot it a lot. I might shoot it once if I'm, if I see a nice deer and I hit it for once and that's it. It's, and so I'm going to shoot it in a, only small number of times. Even on the slam hunt where, I shot 10 pigs myself, I still only shot, 10 pigs, which is, I think about 15 rounds all up. So even then, and that was like, it felt like it, but you actually didn't shoot. It was like, less than a box of ammo that you would shoot at range in 10 minutes. So we're not going to shoot a lot. So we don't need it. That's not really going to affect it. We're not going to overstretch it while we're there. I want something I can carry. I technically prefer timber stocks. I'll use a timber stock in all applications because I believe that if you buy a four-wheel drive, you should get it dirty. If you buy a Ferrari, you should drive it fast. That's what it is. I want something I wanted to hunt with. I'm going to use it for hunting. So I'm going to buy a hunting configuration rifle, which means a traditional hunting style stock. So a simple stock, a medium to light profile barrel. I don't need a heavy barrel. I'm going to buy. One of the things we spoke about is the reasons about pick rails versus scopes that mount straight to the rifle. One of the reasons I like scopes that mount straight to the rifle is because pick rail is just another piece of steel that's on that rifle. So if I can get a scope that mounts straight to the rifle, I'm happier because basically that's one less thing. I'm going to use pretty low mounts. I don't like particularly high mounts on a rifle. So as low as practical to incorporate the scope, and the scope is going to be something like a 2-10 by 40 something. I'll probably want a illuminated reticle, if not illuminated, a dot, but I prefer illuminated reticle. I really like the Steiner Predator, which has illuminated reticle. Really like that. What else do I want that? So caliber wise, I'll want a 30 cal. I don't generally shoot foxes. I will, but I generally don't. Well, let's say I'm not pursuing foxes. I'm not pursuing foxes or goats. Not foxes or rabbits or hare. And if I am, I'd prefer a shotgun for that because I reckon it's much more fun. So I'm shooting primarily in a state forest. I'm looking for deer, goat, pig, and that will get me. I'll be able to take with a 308 or a 3006 with a 150 grain quality pill in it, sambar down. I'm happy to take from sambar through red, true fallow, pig of any size, goat, not a problem. So that'll be my probably the best generalist outfit I can take. The reason I kind of like the 30 cals and the 308 and the 3006 is, one, that they're really effective. Two, they're available everywhere. And three, there's a lot of choice available in them. So even I think, for instance, the 7mm 08 is probably a better round than a 308 in terms of, whole of comparison. But it's a bit more expensive. It's not as readily available, and the options within it from a projectile point of view aren't as great as you can get.
There's not as much factory ammunition available.
You're getting, if you look at 308 across any of the brands, if they've got any like Federal, like Sarco, like Norma, you'll see within the 308 category, they'll have a heap of selection, like from weight and to quality, and that's just because it's so common, and that's one of the benefits of having that.
And I think it's important to note that in some of the places that we go, we don't have big cities and big gun shops with huge variety. So I'm going to go back, probably a few years now, but my first trip to Australia, I went out with my mate Louis Brown, who we had on the podcast. He's now lives in Canada, and we went to his parents' property near Young in New South Wales. And we went down to the Ford dealership because that's where you bought your ammunition from, was from the local car dealership in the town. We went down there, and you went up to the car salesman, and in a glass cabinet behind his desk was the ammunition. And they pretty much stocked 270, 308, 3006, and I think 243 and 22. That's what and shotgun shells. That's it. But, if you buy one of those, you buy a Wildcat cartridge at 2506 or something. If you go to if you drive all the way down to Mudgee or down to Young or something like that in New South Wales, and you forgot your ammo, and you go into the shop and you say, "I'd like 2506," you're probably not going to get it. Whereas if you've got one of those generic
what you're going to be doing is
calibers,
you're going to be driving to caliber country in Tamworth. What you're going to be doing.
So I think it's important that you don't go out and buy one of these big Wildcat cartridges. I mean, you're welcome to, but
I suppose if you do realise what you're doing is you're
limiting your choice.
Probably paying a lot more for your ammo than compared to someone who's shooting similar conditions to you, and you're also limiting. Not only are you paying more, you're limiting your option. Now, the reality is, on a spec to spec basis, some ammo is better than others. So some calibers are better than others. But for the majority of times when you're in a hunting situation, you're not at the brink of the performance of that particular ammo. So as long as you've got a good quality projectile and you're shooting something like a 308 or 270 or whatever it is, you're not on the kind of bleeding edge of maybe or maybe not, or you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be shooting, in most cases, you're shooting within 100 yards and you're whacking this animal with a hell of a lot of energy. And it's, there is no, I suppose, felt difference between a 308 wind shooting, a reasonable quality 308 wind shooting 150 grain ammo at a goat at 100 yards than there is at a wildcat that's shooting some really, really super fast flying thing. In terms of the actual felled outcome, as in dead goat on the ground, you're not pushing it. So those calibers are exciting and they can do lots of stuff, but for most people, your hunting isn't that place. That's not where you test out the limitations of your caliber. So, you don't need to have those kind of calibers. It's certainly cool to have them if you want them, but you don't need it. And I think that's also a really important thing because people, as I said, tend to get influenced by others about calibers. I've got this and it can do this, 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 and this. That's great. But when I'm shooting a pig at 50 yards, I just want to smack it in the head. And, I don't need a lot of technology in that. What I need to make sure is I put that where it goes and then that's it.
Yeah. Mark, I'm just going to stop there for a sec. Sorry, I've just got to go and do something for the kids. I'll be right back.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm on my own again this week.
Okay. Where's the girl?
She's at her company conference down the Gold Coast the whole week.
The BCF or the super group, isn't it?
No, just BCF. Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought they had a whole week to talk about stuff.
Oh, they do, surprisingly. It's a big company and all new products. They get all their trade partners in to showcase their stuff and they get all the store managers in from all the stores and all that sort of thing. So, and management and all the rest of it. It's a big company. So, yeah.
Okay, so when you're ready to crack, what are we going to talk about next?
We're talking about Wildcats calibers. So
Calibers.
I'll mark it again and cool. So, I mean, I guess a Wildcat's probably not a good option for your first rifle. You want to stick to one of those common calibers. As we said, 270. You said you prefer 30 cal. I prefer 30 cal. I've owned several 30 cals. So I've had multiple 308s. I've had 3006. I've had 7x57. So that I've had
275.
It's a 275, which is a great caliber, very, very, very popular. I know who was it? Bell, Karamojo Bell, I think it is. Shot 100 elephant or whatever it was with a 7x57. But try and get ammunition for a .275 or a 7x57 in Australia, you're going to struggle. So it's not up there with one of those.
You'd have to go see Tom at Rigby.
Yeah.
He'll have it.
Yeah, he will. Yeah, because it's one of those Rigby rifles. But if you can afford the rifle, you can afford the ammo for it.
I'm just thinking how many 30 cals I've had. Lots. Wow, yeah. So what? 2 9.3s, 3 308s, a 3006, a 3220. What else is in there? That's probably and 3 3030s.
Oh yeah, lever actions. Yeah.
Yeah. So 3030s. Yeah.
And I guess what we've spoken about there is, you said the number of 30 cals you've had, and you said the 9.3. So people are probably going, but hold on, you're talking about 9.3s.
Which is technically not a 366. Yeah. And I've had a 3220, so that's a 3.32. The 3030s are 30s. The 308's a 30, and the 3006 is a 30. So they are 30s. But when I say 30 cal, I mean within the 30 cal. If it's got 3 in front of it.
Yeah, correct. So I guess the one thing we can say is that you can measure a caliber in imperial metric. There's and we've spoken about that previously. I think it was Caliber Craziness, if I remember correctly, on our podcast.
Well, I'll give you an example of that. I've just written about it tonight. I've still got it here if I can find it. The calibers the sour comes in is really cool because a lot of European calibers in there. Where is it? There it is there. Because some I haven't heard of. There's what is it? It's a 10.3 by 60R.
Okay.
It's got 375, an 8 by 68, which I think is a Morser.
And
there's this one. Where is it? It's called a Swiss.
I know the Swede, which is a 6.5.
No, not a Swede.
A Swiss. Okay.
So there's a Swiss, and even if you think about the Swedes, which is a 6.5
by 55, yeah.
But there's a 6.5 Greek. There's a 6.5 Swede. There's a heap of variations of the 6.5 Swede. And then, of course, you've got the more modern 6.5s, which are Creedmoor, and there's a practical, what's it?
PRC.
Lots and lots of variations of that. And so, you can get really, as we've said before, you can get bogged in the or get stuck in the rabbit hole of calibers. But again, for your first rifle, pick a generic, a reasonably generic caliber. Like I would recommend something like 308. One is you won't have a problem with ammo. 2, you'll have a good selection of ammo. And 2, it won't cost you an arm and a leg, and it'll do most situations you find yourself in. You'll be able to take the game with the 308. I suppose, as I said before, that the lefty and right is a challenge, but I won't go into too much other than the fact that if you're a lefty, you do have limited options. That's the way it goes. But one thing I often get asked, and it comes up in conversation, is that, so Graham is now looking at his first rifle, and he said to me, "Oh, look, I'm going to buy a safe." And I said, He said, "What kind of safe are you buying?" And I said, "The biggest one you can get, because you'll fill it." And that's the thing. Most people, when they talk about their first rifle, talk about it like it's going to be their only rifle, but generally that's not the case. So thinking about that too is really important, because you don't want to have like a lot of calibers that are very similar. And, you'll see people ahhing over, I've got a 243, but I want to get something a little bit different. Should I go to a 223, or should I go this? There's a hell of a lot of crossover in calibers. And yes, you again have different performance, but if you think about it, it's kind of like a Venn diagram. There's a hell of a lot of place where they cross over, where they're if not equally as good as each other on a ballistics table. From a hunting point of view, they are as equally as good. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to kill a fallow deer. If you can kill a fallow deer with the 223 at under 100 yards, and you kill a fallow deer with a 308 under 100 yards, there isn't any kind of delineation between dead. It's dead. So, or a 243, or whatever it is. If it's capable of killing the animal within the range that you're firing it, then it's capable of killing the animal within the range you're firing at. You don't get any more bonus points by blowing it up. No, it's just all you're doing with having a heavy caliber, if you will, is that you're kind of putting things more in your favor.
But on that, if you weren't chasing fallow, you lived in the Brisbane Valley and you were going to go hunting a red deer, you wouldn't be taking a 223. It's not the ideal application.
Unless you were pulling up in the paddock, putting on the bonnet, and head shooting them.
Yeah, and that went back to that original question we had: is what are you doing and how are you doing it?
That's right, and you would say that's what I do, and if you were in New Zealand, you'd be using a 222, because that's what they culled thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of them. So again, that's the context of what you're using it in. If we kind of, what's the last thing in there to me anyway is then. That's all the kind of practical stuff, or the logical stuff. There's also, you want to actually like this thing.
Yeah, that's true. You got to look at it and you got to hold it.
You got to look at it. You got to like it. You got to say, do you want to, the knockabout idea? So do you want to go to a synthetic or a laminate type of rifle? Do you want a tactical rifle or a tactical rifle with a thumbhole stock and all that kind of stuff?
Or the chassis ones as well?
Yeah, well, chassis might be a bit limiting. I suppose if you're strong enough, you can carry around a chassis rifle. I wouldn't want to be carrying around one all day, but, you can if you want. Or do you want a traditional rifle? Do you want to have a more traditional looking rifle? And again, I'm having this conversation with a friend at the moment, and that's what it is. And ultimately, he wants a rifle that looks like a hunting rifle. So we're looking at, we're putting all these things into play about how we're going to use it, what you're going to do with it, but also, what do I want from this thing? I'm going to spend my money on this thing, so I want this thing just as much as, the logical component of it. I want this thing. So, the idea is he wants a traditional hunting rifle. And so we've looked at a couple, and one of the ones that's jumped out recently is the Tikka, but the premium. There's a Tikka premium.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which is a Tikka just with a nicer timber stock.
Yeah, they do some beautiful timber stocks. Yeah.
So it's got, it's kind of got the practicality and performance of a Tikka. It's just a bit closer to a Seiko in terms of its quality, appearance. So, okay. And it's it's reasonably priced, especially compared to a Seiko. So if you think about that, and I always say, if you're going to save money on a rifle, it just means you can spend more on your optics.
Yeah,
and that's probably, almost, in a way, you interact more with your optics than you do with the rifle itself.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you want to have, if you're going to spend money, you want to spend money on your optics.
Yeah, I think, the difference between rifle manufacturers at the moment is very limited. Well, not limited, but I think is the gap between them is smaller. So if you think of, Sarco and Tikka are actually made in the same factory, they're owned by the same company. They probably use the same, well, very similar manufacturing techniques. Yes, their tolerances, etc., might be different, slightly different, but there's not much in it. You look at a Remington, you look at a, there's subtle differences between them, but at the end of the day, they're all very similar and of a similar build quality, because that's what you come to expect, and there's safety standards, etc., that have to be upheld. But optics, there's certainly a huge variance in optics, and it certainly does come down to you get what you pay for. Yes, we spoke about earlier that there was you can get more bang for your buck now with optics, but you certainly do get what you pay for. When you look at those high-end European optics, nothing else comes close to them.
No.
The other brands are getting closer, but they've been making, and some of those companies have been in operation for hundreds of years, and they've perfected their, the glass that they use. It's all proprietary. It's all specialized. You certainly get what you pay for when it comes to optics.
Yeah, if there's, yes, there is grades of bolt action rifle, but there is a fairly big selection of good quality entry level bolt action rifles that perform at a pretty high standard. I was, again, not so long ago, MOA was like, oh, this is an MOA rifle, blow a trumpet type thing, tap your feet. Most rifles I've encountered will shoot MOA with factory ammo nowadays.
Well, most rifles are guaranteed, and they put the thing in the box.
I mean, that's it. Once upon a time, this rifle is a guaranteed MOA. It was this big thing. Now it's like, it's MOA. You almost expect it to be MOA. And if you shoot any kind of reasonable factory ammo, you should be shooting close MOA or very close to MOA. So accuracy there. Bolt actions aren't all that complicated. Some people make better versions of others, but there is a hell of a lot of bolt action rifles again in that kind of in that range that are completely serviceable, do what they're supposed to do, and we'll get you on. We'll get you game. So yeah, there's I mean, we were talking to Tom last week, Tom Auger. He sells bolt action rifles that start at about $25,000, and they go up from there. That's one area from bolt action, but there's entry level Tikkas, there's and there's even I mean, I haven't had a chance to shoot one, but I'm liking those Frankie.
Oh, I'm liking one of them.
Horizon, or is it
Frankie Horizon? Yeah,
I'm liking them. They look pretty good for an entry level rifle. They look, they look. I mean, I've got a Frankie shotgun, and again, for an entry level shotgun, it's a pretty nice shotgun. And so if they're rifles or anything like that, then yeah, that's a pretty good entry level firearm. And they're significantly less than than stuff you can buy in terms of dollar wise. And the other thing is, there's been a trend in firearms is that they're kind of upscaling them. So once upon a time, you'd go in a gun shop and they're all the same color. But everyone now has an option where it's like, it might be a camo stock, and it might have Cerakoted barrel, and it might have, it's got a lot of the things that people used to add on as customization. You can buy that now in the shop.
Yeah, fluted barrels and fluted bolts and all sorts.
Yeah, reviewed a Savage rifle. So I reviewed a Sarco S20, and then reviewed a Savage. Now, miles apart in terms of lots of things, but the Savage was very similar in towards the Sarco in that it was customized. It came with a Cerakoted barrel. It came with the a camo model stock and things like that. So they went into the habit of the effort of making it look like something you might want, or that something that you might otherwise in the past have paid someone to kind of modify for you, you can buy that now. So there's good options around there. And, you know, the sour that I reviewed today, or just finished reviewing today, it comes in 3 different options. It comes in what they call an Outback, which is a synthetic stock, a high country, which is like fluted barrel and carbon fiber stock, or what they call the elegance, which is, you know, from grade 1 to grade 10 timber, depending on which one you select.
But I guarantee you, all of them came out of the factory guaranteeing sub MOA, no matter on the cost, because that's the standard these days, as you said, about MOA. So you could spend however many thousand on the sour, or however, you know, significantly less on a savage.
In that band where you're hunting a deer or a goat or a pig and it's within 200 yards in the state forest, in that band of what will be acceptable to that, it's now a very big band of options in there. There's a lot of the things to consider. And, you know, like Beretta were very recently doing that kind of package deal on rifles. You know, one of those things would set you might hunt the whole of the country with that rifle.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So you don't need to, or more importantly, you don't need to, but your options are available. You go down somewhere like Venture, you know, there's probably, you could walk along there and there's probably 5 comparable bolt action hunting rifles in the same kind of price range, same kind of thing that you could choose, and you could say, well, I like this one better, rather than here's your option. You know, there's only one, here it is.
Yeah, that's like buying a car. You know, there's so many different brands out there, and people have an affinity for how a car looks and the styling. Same happens with rifles; they all function the same. You'll put your foot down; they're all drive from A to B. A gun's the same. You pull the trigger, it goes bang. What do you like, and does it fit? Do you fit in the car? You know, that's a big thing. You know, we don't all fit inside a Mini. You know, and therefore a rifle might not fit you. It might be too small, it might be too big, it might be too heavy. You know, you've got to go in. That's why something like Venture is great, because you can try so many different brands, and within the same brand, so many different variants. As you said, you know, there's 3 or 4 different variants that you can try. Find one that just fits. So for me, you know, my Tika T3, I put it up and it fits. It's just comfortable. It's everything is right about it. I could pick up a Savage, and not to sing the Savage or anything, but it might not fit me. For instance, years ago, I think I held a Browning, I think it was.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've never owned a Browning because it
just didn't fit me.
That's right. There was this, I think it was the X-Bolt. It looked fantastic. I like that. You know, it was kind of like timber, but really modern, hard cut.
Yeah.
Picked it up. It was about that. You know, about half a foot too short for me. It was like this
exact same problem
like a little BB gun type thing.
Yeah, it's the same problem I've had. I've also had an issue with the Howers. They don't fit me. They just don't feel. They just don't fit me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't feel right about when I've got one on my shoulder. Yeah,
and that's why, you know, when you're buying a rifle and you've decided it's for hunting, and these are the species I'm going to hunt. Don't, you know, say I'm going to buy a Tika just because Mark shoots a Tika, or Mark recommends it, or your mate shoots one. Go down somewhere like Venture, or, you know, your local gun shop, and try them. See what, you know, shoulder them. Don't point them at someone, but shoulder them and point it at the wall. And, you know, does it come up nicely? Does it smooth? Does it fit you? Are you trying to move your body to fit the rifle, or does the rifle just come up nicely and smooth? You know, and I think that's important. You need to be comfortable with it, because you're going to be walking with it, and as you said earlier, we don't shoot them very often, you know, but when you do, you want to be comfortable, confident.
That's right. There's a criticality.
For me, fit is one of the most important. I might walk into the gun shop saying I want to buy a Tika T3, and if it doesn't fit me, I'm not buying a Tika. I'm going to buy the Sako or the Browning, whichever fits me perfectly. You got to feel comfortable with it, and can you carry it? Can you shoulder it? You know, all of that's important.
Yep. Very true. It's actually a good way to I suppose wrap that up. So ultimately, you go through this list. You want to actually go somewhere, or go to multiple places if you have to. Put those things on your shoulder and say, okay, this suits me, or it doesn't. fit is really important. And I said, not all rifles fit the same. I've experienced that firsthand.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Is there anything else?
No, I think that again, for those who, who've asked us a question, I think that might wrap it up quite nicely.
Cool. Awesome. Well, territory's coming up soon. We're looking forward to that. Hopefully Ian will be back for the next one. He's missing in action for the second week in a row. So, yeah, we'll see where he is. We were talking about rifles, so I think he just didn't want to be here because he can't contribute anything. He's like, I pull trigger, it goes bang. So I'm happy.
Right. Or it doesn't.
Yeah. Or in my case, it doesn't. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thanks, Mark. We'll catch up soon.
Okay, buddy. That's a good
See you,
one.
mate.
See you again.